Alright, yeah! Thank God for fantasy football. I'm Buster Brown, and the show, well, it's called Redemption Rehab. And if you tuned in today, it's for one reason, and it's to start winning championships in fantasy football. Here we are on our website, fantasyfootballredemptionrehab.com. When you get a chance, you gotta check it out. Today, we're talking about the rookies coming in to the NFL that are going to impact fantasy football this year in the 2022 NFL season and for years to come at wide receiver, running back, tight end, and quarterback. So buckle up, get out your popcorn, and let's head over to the chalkboard
and check out the facts.
Okay, here we are talking about the rookie running backs. They're going to impact fantasy football in the 2022 NFL season. On the screen behind me is a website called drafttech.com. They're going to tell us, they're going to basically rank the running backs coming out of college that are coming into the NFL draft this year. Starting up here behind me with BREECE Hall out of Iowa State and Kenneth Walker III out of Michigan State. These are your top two running backs. They're going to get drafted in all your Dynasty leagues, all of your redraft leagues. The redraft leagues are the leagues you play in with your friends, co-workers, family. So these guys are going to get drafted in pretty much all those leagues. From James Cook on down to Ohio to Isaiah Spiller down here at Texas A&M down here. They're not going to get drafted they're probably going to be on your waiver wire, but you still need to know who they are because some of these guys are going to be handcuffs to the starter you drafted, or maybe you have an injury later in the year and you need to have a fill-in for a week, or maybe next year these guys are going to be the starting running back and you already know who they are based upon the things you see today. So what we're going to do before we get into these guys is let's take a look at the last two rookie running back classes of the last 2 years and see where those guys are so you could give these guys some perspective. Okay, behind me is Draft Tech from the last 2 years. On the right side of the screen, as you can see over here, is the 2021 rookies that came into the league last year. And on the left side of the screen, as you can see over here, is the 2020 rookies that came into the NFL. We did draft preview shows on these guys, and we have predictions. You can always go back and look at YouTube or our website or Facebook. These shows are on there if you want to take a look at those shows to see what I said back then. So let's take a look at the screen on your right. The guys that I really liked last year were these top three. Draft Tech liked them too. We showcased these top 6 guys, showed you all their stats and some highlights. We told you we liked Travis Etienne. He's down there in Jacksonville now. He got hurt last year before the season started, so the book's still out on him. We still like him. You should consider drafting him in 2022. As you can see here, the next running back, Najee Harris. Hey, man, he had a good year for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Kind of lost steam at the end of the year. Poor quarterback play on the Steelers. Poor offensive line. It wasn't his fault, but we think he's a top 5 back going into 2022, so he's going to be in the first round, top 5. And we love Javonte Williams. We liked him last year out of North Carolina. He's going to have a big year this year with Denver. Denver's going to improve their offense under Russell Wilson, who they got in a trade with Seattle. He's got, he's going to have a big year. So we like him. These next 3 guys are all handcuffs. We focused on them last year. You can see as you go down this list and they rank goes, lower and lower. These guys ended up being handcuffs along with Ramondre Stevenson. And, if you draft these guys, you should know who the starter is. Like it's Sanders in Philadelphia. You should handcuff Kenneth Gainwell. It's Christian McCaffrey down in Carolina. You should handcuff Chuba Hubbard. Trey Sermon is a handcuff out here for this guy down here, Elijah Mitchell. Elijah Mitchell is a guy I'd be drafting out of San Francisco. If you get a chance to get him in your upcoming drafts, you should. I like what he can do. We didn't mention him last year, nor did we mention much about Ramondre Stevenson. He's over there in New England. He's the handcuff to Harris, the running back Harris, Damian Harris over there. So if you get these guys right here, these 4 guys, you want to get them as handcuffs, but you don't want them as standalone value. But let's take a look at the year prior to that. As you can see here, from DeAndre Swift all the way down here to Keyshawn Vaughn, these guys have some value. DeAndre Swift, he's worth drafting out of Detroit. He gets hurt a lot, so you want to know who his handcuff is, and you want to get him, especially him. Jonathan Taylor is our gold standard. When he comes out of college, Jonathan Taylor was 5'10", 226 pounds, as you could see here, out of Wisconsin, but he played 3 years. He's our gold standard. We compare all these other running backs we're going to look at as rookies today to this guy. He had 6,000 yards, 6,174 yards in 3 seasons. That's 2,000 yards per season. He rushed for 50 touchdowns. We're going to have trouble finding somebody that did that in this class. And he caught 42 balls in 3 years for 457 yards and another 5 touchdowns. So when we compare the rookies today, we're going to compare him to Jonathan Taylor. You're not going to see anybody with 6,000 yards. You're not going to see, you might see one guy with 50 touchdowns and, 42 receptions. But Jonathan Taylor's probably going to be the first pick in most drafts, second pick maybe, if he's healthy. And he's someone you want on your team in 2022. And we told you about him 2 years ago as the player we thought was going to win Rookie of the Year. And he ended up losing out to Joe Burrow, who had a great season and just got out of the Super Bowl, even though he lost. We also told you a couple years about J.K. Dobbins out of Ohio State, 5'9", 209. We like him last year, unfortunately. He got hurt, blew out his ACL before the season started. We still like him, and if he's healthy, we would consider drafting him. We're not considering drafting Zach Moss next year, even if the guy you want over there is Singletary in Buffalo, and whoever his backup is, they signed some people in free agency. I would consider maybe somebody else besides Zach Moss, but I do definitely like Cam Akers. If you get a chance to draft Cam Akers out of the Los Angeles Rams, they just won a Super Bowl. He's going to recover from his Achilles injury. He had it last year, but came back into the playoffs and looked just like Cam Akers is supposed to. We really like him. We're not suggesting Clyde Edwards-Helaire or A.J. Dillon at this point, or Keyshawn Vaughn. These guys are all handcuffs, in my opinion. I don't think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is probably going to get the start. He's going to play a lot of slot receiver, so we'll have to see how that pans out. He is going up against Ronald Jones from Tampa Bay, so that's a good running back, and they always have 2-3 guys they really like, even though Darrell Williams hasn't signed back with them yet, who I also like. So that's up in the air on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I do like A.J. Dillon as a handcuff to Aaron Jones. You should be considering taking both of these guys if you get Aaron Jones, because if something happens to Aaron Jones, this kid's going to handle the ball, and guess what? He's a load. I could see him having a very good year, and I'm probably going to avoid Keyshawn Vaughn until he shows me he can play in the NFL, pick up the blitz. These rookie running backs we're about to go show you, if they can't pick up the blitz in the NFL, they're not playing much on third down, because their starting quarterback could get hurt because they missed a block. So you have to be able to run the ball in the NFL, catch the ball out of the backfield, and you have to be able to block, meaning pick up the blitz, because your quarterback will get killed if you don't. So let's head back over and check out the rookie running backs, which is why you tuned in for the 2022 NFL season. Okay, here we are back on DraftTech.com checking out the rookie running backs that are going to impact the NFL in the 2022 NFL season, starting with BREECE Hall out of Iowa State. We're going to compare all these guys to Jonathan Taylor, who was our gold standard at running back when he came out of Wisconsin a couple years ago. Remember, Jonathan Taylor had 6,000 yards rushing, 50 TDs, caught like 40-some balls, was about 5'10", 226 pounds. So let's take a look at some of these running backs. BREECE Hall right here out of Iowa State. You can see he's fallen down the rankings in the last couple of weeks, -5 where he was a few weeks ago. And the reason is because he didn't have a good pro day and he didn't do well. He didn't stand out at the combine. He probably did all those things well, but not good enough to move him into the first round of the NFL draft. He's probably going to be a day 2 pick along with Kenneth Walker, who's below him right here. Both are expected to go in the second round. The guys below him are third round, all the way down here to Isaiah Spiller, which could fall to the 5th, 6th round of the NFL draft. But it's important that you know who they are. Why? Because they're going to impact fantasy football in the next 2 and 3 years, even if they don't do it next year. So let's get into it. The guy we want to talk about right now is this guy, Breece Hall, out of Iowa State. He's 6'1", 210-pound junior. This guy's got quite a resume. He played 3 years in the Big 12. He was first-team All-American last year. He was 2-time Player of the Year in the Big 12. He was a 2-time Heisman Trophy finalist. In 2020, he finished 6th, and in 2021, he finished 10th. That's huge. I mean, that's a hell of a resume for this kid. He played 3 years, 2019 to 2021. He had almost 4,000 yards rushing. He had 50 TDs, just like Jonathan Taylor. And he had a lot more receptions, double that of Jonathan Taylor at 82. And he had twice as many yards as Jonathan Taylor, 734 yards receiving with 6 more touchdowns. You gotta love this kid, Breece Hall. He's a big kid. He had an amazing career. He has a lot of awards and, finalists in the Heisman. So he's got the resume, and he's going to have a great NFL career. You should consider drafting him later in your drafts, depending upon who drafts him in the NFL. If he goes to a team where he's immediately the starter, he's going to move way up the ADP chart. Average draft position is known as ADP in fantasy football. If you don't know what that is, Google it and they'll explain it. So I expect Breece Hall to be drafted in all your dynasty leagues and all your redraft leagues, which are the leagues you play with your buddies and your family or your coworkers. The next guy I want to talk about is this guy, Kenneth Walker III out of Michigan State. He's 5'9", 206 pounds, and he's got a killer resume. Let's take a look at that. Kenneth Walker out of Michigan State is 5'9", 206-pound junior. He was a Walter Camp and Doak Walker Award winner. He was unanimous first-team All-American. That's huge. He was the Big Ten Co-Player of the Year. He was a Big Ten Running Back of the Year in 2021. And he was the first-team Big Ten Running Back. He was a Maxwell Award finalist, and he was 6th in the Heisman Trophy. He played 3 years in college. His first 2 years, 2019 and 2020, he played for Wake Forest. He was nothing spectacular. He did have 13 TDs in his last year at Wake Forest. Once he transferred to Michigan State in 2021, his career took off. He played in 12 games. We had 1,636 yards rushing with 18 TDs and 13 receptions for 89 yards. His career stats are 2,794 yards rushing, 35 TDs, and 19 receptions. Now, the problem, as I see with Kenneth Walker, and this happens a lot with running backs that coming into the NFL, they are in a system where they don't catch a lot of passes out of the backfield. So he's going to have to learn to do that. It may knock him out of the second round of the NFL draft. He may find himself in the third round because of that one thing. And if Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker are going to do anything on the field in the NFL, they better learn how to pass block and pick up a blitz, or they're going to get their quarterback in the NFL killed. So these are the two main guys that are going to be drafted in all your fantasy football leagues, and you better, the key is where are they going to get drafted. We don't know because this is the NFL pre-NFL draft special show. We don't know, but we'll find out at the end of April. Other guys I like a lot, from James Cook down to CJ Spiller, we're going to touch on quickly. So these two guys right here, as you can see, James Cook and Zamir White both played for Georgia at the same time, just like Nick Chubb did with Sony Michel. They both got drafted in the NFL. Nick Chubb's had a great career. Sony Michel, the book's still out on him. He's not a bad running back. He's produced, but he's not, probably going to be drafted in a lot of leagues. And he's probably more of a handcuff to Cam Akers, who we mentioned earlier. Let's take a look at the stats of these two guys, and starting with James Cook. James Cook is 5'11", 190-pound senior. He is a national champion, and he's the brother of Dalvin Cook. In his 4 years at Georgia, he had 1,503 yards rushing, 14 TDs with 67 receptions for 730 yards and 6 TDs. This kid catches the ball out of the backfield. He was their third down back. He could probably play all, like his brother, play all 3 downs or 4 down back, whatever you want to call him. But in Georgia, they didn't use him that way. And he came in to sub or on third down mostly as a pass catching back for this guy, Zamir White, who's 5'11", 215 pounds. Well, let's take a look at his career. Zamir White was a national champ, just like James Cook. The difference between the two is their size. Zamir White was a team captain. He was a 2-year starter of his 3 years there. He rushed for 2,043 yards rushing, 25 TDs, but he only caught 17 balls for 132 yards. So the beef with this guy is that he doesn't catch the ball out of the backfield just like Kenneth Walker. But, in the NFL, that doesn't mean that you can't learn. He's going to have to if he wants to be on the field all 4 downs. I mean, you got to be able to pick up the blitz like we talked about. But Zamir White's a player. You better know who he is, because if he turns into the next Nick Chubb, he's going to go a lot higher than he's going to go in this year's draft. That's for sure. Now, the rest of these guys, I'm pretty sure are definitely not going to get drafted in any of your redraft leagues, probably going to get drafted in all your dynasty leagues. But let's take a quick look at some of these guys so you have an idea who they are, just in case your starter gets hurt and you have to pick these guys up on the waiver wire this year. Starting with Dameon Pierce out of Florida. You can see over here he moved up 15 spots because why? He probably had a good Senior Bowl, East-West game, Shrine game, whatever, and he probably had a good a pro day, and he probably can do everything that we talked about you need to do. So let's take a look at this kid. He's 5'10", 215-pound senior. He played for Florida 4 years. He never had more than 575 yards rushing in any year, which is concerning. He did have 1,806 yards and 23 TDs rushing in his career, with 45 receptions for 422 yards and 5 TDs. Nothing spectacular about this guy, but for some reason Draft Tech has him high. Clearly, these are the guys that can tell you who's going to be doing well in the NFL. So we wanted to touch on Dameon Pierce so you had an idea in case you need to pick somebody up off your waiver wire and he ends up being the starter. A couple other guys we need to talk about is, how about this guy, KYREN Williams out of Notre Dame, 5'9", 194-pound junior. This kid had an amazing career at Notre Dame. He's 3 years he played there. He was a Paul Hornung finalist. He was the team captain his last year. He was a Doak Walker candidate. In 2 years, just in the 2 years, last 2 years, he had 2,153 yards rushing, 27 TDs. But what really sets this guy apart is his 78 receptions for 675 yards and 4 TDs. This kid can clearly play football. He can run the ball well. He can catch the ball well. Whether he can pick up the blitz is gonna determine where he gets drafted or whether he gets any playing time. I do like him, and it just depends on where he gets drafted in this year's NFL draft. The next guy is RACHAAD White out of Arizona State. Let's take a quick look at him. RACHAAD White played for Herm Edwards. Remember him, for the New York Jets head coach? He had that famous saying, "We play to win." He's 6'2", 210 pounds. He only played 2 years there, so he must have did some junior college stuff earlier. He had 1,420 yards rushing with 20 TDs, and he had 51 receptions for 607 yards with 2 TDs. In his last year at Arizona State, of those 51 receptions, he had 43 of them last year. That means this kid was catching the ball out of the backfield. He's a big guy, 6'2", 210, so he can definitely pick up linebackers that are blitzing, safeties that are blitzing, and he can run the ball. I wouldn't be surprised if RACHAAD White got his chance sooner than later to start in the NFL. Plus, he played for Herm Edwards. I'm sure Herm Edwards is telling everybody in the NFL, this is my guy. Another guy I want to show you before we let you go is Isaiah Spiller down here at Texas A&M. Another tall guy, 6'1", 225-pound junior. and he had an amazing career at Texas A&M. He played there 3 years, basically, had almost 3,000 yards rushing with 25 TDs. He had 74 receptions, so therefore he can catch the ball out of the backfield for 585 yards and another touchdown. He's a pretty good running back. I'm not sure why he's fallen. If you look over here, he's falling 40 spots. That's not good. That means he was, 5th or 6th on this list just a few weeks ago. What happened? Probably didn't have a good pro day. Probably didn't have a good combine. And people said, hey, man, stiffen the hips, something. Who knows? But he did not do well, and he's going to fall in the draft according to Draft Tag. So keep an eye on this guy in the 5th, 6th round. He'll probably go in one of those rounds along with RACHAAD White and even KYREN Williams, and Dameon Pierce. These guys probably all go in that 3rd day, 4th through 7th round. But they're good running backs. You need to know who they are, or you're going to get left behind by people like me. I'm telling you, this is my 35th year of playing fantasy football. One of the keys to me winning championships every year is knowing who's coming in the league. Another thing I want to show you before I let you go is my sleeper picks in college. These running backs I'm about to tell you are guys that may not even get drafted, and if they do, it'll be very late in the draft, but they might impact fantasy football in years to come. Let's take a look at those guys, starting with Jerome Ford. Jerome Ford's out of Cincinnati. He's 5'11", 215 pounds. He played his first few years at Alabama and then transferred to Cincinnati, where he had 1,953 yards rushing, 30 touchdowns with 31 receptions in his 4-year career. They made the playoffs in the college playoff thing, and he's one of the reasons they did it, man. He can run the ball. He's definitely a sleeper pick. Another guy I really like is the guy below him here, Brian Robinson Jr. out of Alabama. When Jerome Ford transferred from Alabama, he was playing behind Najee Harris and Brian Robinson Jr. So Brian Robinson Jr., 6'1", 228-pound senior, and he's a wrecking ball, man. When this guy hits you, you're going to know it. Let's take a look at his career. 5 years at Alabama. He rushed for 2,704 yards rushing with 29 TDs and 52 receptions, 446 yards. Well, he can catch the ball out of the backfield and he can run the ball. And I'll tell you what, he's a prototypical NFL running back. So don't be surprised if Brian Robinson Jr. ends up on a team and ends up as a starter. Maybe not this year, but down the road. And the last guy I want to tell you about is a guy that killed me last year. Hassan Haskins out of Michigan. Wow, that's another big kid. 6 foot, 220 pounds senior. He played 3 years at Michigan. He rushed for 2,324 yards rushing with 30 TDs, 24 receptions for 171 yards. When you watch this kid, just Google the Ohio State game with him, and he had like 4 or 5 touchdowns, and he was the reason they won the game. He's a big kid. He could definitely play football, and whoever drafts him is going to get a good football player. Now, all these things I showed you we do to help you determine who you're going to draft in fantasy football. Whether I rarely draft rookies, but the second-year players that we talked about, I really like. Remember, we just showed you with Travis Etienne and Najee Harris, that group. We really like those guys. We really like those third-year guys too. We told you about Swift over there in Detroit, and Jonathan Taylor over there in Indianapolis. These are your third-year running backs, and every year you build upon your knowledge by knowing who's coming into the league. It's like building a building. You got your foundation, your first floor, your second floor, your third floor, and that's the same thing with those coming into the league at every position. And we put together these pre-draft specials and try to make them as interesting and as informative as we can to help you win championships in fantasy football. I'm Buster Brown. The show is called Redemption Rehab. Good luck.